request the Dean, Dr. Shankaran Raghunathan, to kindly introduce the chief guest.
Let me start by thanking Mr. Srinivas Raghavan for accepting our invitation to be the chief guest and the convocation speaker for the first convocation of the National Management School. Mr. Srinivas Raghavan, we picked for a few reasons, and I hopefully feel that he'll become a role model for our students. For one, he was one of the first believers in the National Management School as we went about trying to get corporate support. Sundaram, first one that came forward to sign an understanding with us that would help us to grow. So for that, I feel it's appropriate that he is here today to be the first convict. But more importantly, Mr. Srinivas Raghavan started off as a department manager in Sundaram Finance, stayed on for 20 long years to become the managing director. And I think that is something that most of us MBAs should emulate. The average tenure of MBAs today in their first job is only 6 months, and I hope that is not the case with our students, okay? So that's one of the reasons why I wanted Mr. Srinivas Raghavan to be our first convocation speaker, to set the stage and the tone for our students. So he stayed on in Sundaram Finance. He's leading it very successfully. When I met with him, I was sort of teasing him to know more about his way of handling the industry. So I asked him, would you become a bank? Why didn't you start an education loan subsidiary and so on? He said, Dr. Shankaran, there's one thing that I know, and I know that very well, and that's asset-based finance. And I do that very well, and that's what I want to do. So that's another thing. Sticking to the knitting is an important strategy, and he, in his management style, epitomizes that. And I'm glad to have him here as the first convocation speaker. Mr. Srinivas Raghavan.
May I now request the chief guest to deliver the convocation address, please?
Parents, guests, members of faculty, and especially the graduating class of 2011. I'm very pleased and also very honored to be in your midst this evening. But simultaneously, I'm also wondering, with all the justification that your dean offered for inviting me, I'm still quite unsure as to my credentials to be delivering this convocation address. My job is made that much harder by the presence of some people whom I really admire sitting here in the audience. So I'm wondering if some of what I'm going to say is even going to sound presumptuous. But I seek the indulgence of all my eminent senior friends, both on and off the stage. Let me begin by congratulating Dr. Shankaran and his team for, to my mind, achieving pretty much what seemed to me, 3 years ago when we first talked, to be a very, very ambitious sort of goal. I never doubted Dr. Shankaran's sincerity of purpose. I didn't doubt his commitment. I didn't doubt his single-mindedness in wanting to achieve everything that he presented. But given the fact that we operate in the environment that we do, he very briefly and diplomatically touched upon the regulatory side of things. We all know how hard and how challenging that can often be. But he kept faith together with his team, and all credit to you, Dr. Shankaran, and to your team for making this day a reality. I think it's a day that all of you should be really proud of. The fact that you've turned out, no doubt, a very small graduating class, but a graduating class that you can be very proud of, and the fact that they've all been placed and placed well in companies of repute, I think is a great testimony to all your hard work, to your commitment, to your dedication. Of course, no doubt, no less impressive is the exchange programs, the flow of MBA students, visiting students from the US. This is, I'm sure, for many of us, a very new phenomenon because, at least for people of my generation, it was only one-way traffic. All of us packed our bags and went to the US. So it's nice to see that we have people coming from the US as part of their MBA education to India, especially to Madras. So that too is something that warms the cockles of the heart. So that's, I'm sure, something that will only grow, because with all the challenges that we face, I think India is probably one of the most exciting countries in the world today, certainly one of the most exciting destinations. And already one is beginning to hear that lots of people from the West are coming to India looking for jobs. So there are many Indian companies today that are populated by Westerners, which is a first, certainly. And therefore, I believe in time to come, we will see more of inbound traffic, both in the sphere of education as well as, just to work in this very exciting country. We struggle, obviously, with a few things, but I am a very, very firm believer that India's time has come. With all the challenges that we face, all the troubles that we have with a parliament which is more often non-functioning than functioning, we still have tremendous energy, we have great potential, and most importantly, I think we have the advantage of demographics. And that alone, I think, is going to propel India forward in a manner that very few would believe possible of this country. I was wondering what one speaks of in a convocation address. There's a first time for everything. This is my first time. So I was scratching my head as to what I wanted to share with all of you. I was certain that, I didn't want to stand here and deliver a bhashan. I didn't want to be telling you, do's and don'ts and rights and wrongs. Instead, I thought it might be a good idea, as you guys set off on your respective journeys, to share with you some of the lessons that I have learnt, some I continue to learn, in my journey of 30-something years working for essentially the banking and financial services sectors. Many lessons, all of which I can't cover possibly in a 20-minute address. So I sort of put down the 5 things that for me were top of mind. This is leaving aside the basics, which I'm sure all our parents teach us, which is be a good human being, be honest, be straightforward. Those are things I take as givens. So those are not on my list, but it doesn't mean that they're not important. But the 5 things that I'd like to share with you as my learnings, just for you to think about as you step out into the world. On top of that list is a quality which is often underrated, which is the quality of listening. Often today, when you go for job interviews, when you go to different fora, people always say that communication skills are very important. And indeed they are. Unfortunately, oftentimes, communication is misunderstood as being only the ability to speak well, the ability to make great PowerPoint presentations, be articulate, use jargon, and talk your way glibly through a situation. That is one part of communication. The other part, and to my mind, the more important part of communication, is the ability to listen. And when I say listen, it's listening as in what goes in through your ears, but more importantly, being able to admit of another point of view. The ability to accept that there is probably more than one way to look at anything in life, and the ability to respect another point of view. So communication, to me, and this is a lesson that I've learned, because when I started out, I too believed that communication was all about, being a fancy presenter or an impressive speaker. And that's important, because first impressions are made in terms of how articulate you are. But in the long run, what I've learnt is that listening is really the more critical part of communication. That's lesson number one. And as I say, it's a lesson that is work in progress. I continue to learn that lesson, because at times one tends to get impatient. One tends to butt in when somebody else is talking, and then you have to knock yourself and say, pull back. The other person has a point of view, a valid point of view. Listen. It becomes harder and harder as you go higher up the ladder, because when you're the boss, you don't have to listen, right? You can just say, this is it, last word, because I say so. And it's something that you have to consciously push back from, because it doesn't matter whether you're the boss, whoever you are, listening always is important. Listening always enriches you as a person, enriches your overall ability to communicate. So that's lesson number one. The second lesson that I've learnt is that of all the various qualities that we imbibe, of the various things that we are taught as children, as young adults growing up, the one thing which perhaps is slowly losing its importance, people are beginning to value less and less, is a quality called humility. For some reason, I find increasingly people seem to believe that humility is a form of weakness. I don't know why. I don't know if it's... I hate to think of it as a generational thing, right? Because generation gaps are so cliche. So I hate to think of it as something that this is part of a generation thing. But it is true that increasingly people don't seem to value this quality called humility. And believe me, as you navigate your paths through your jobs, your careers, your lives, again and again you will come up against situations, you'll come up in odd places against people where humility will often win the day for you. Again, I hate to generalize. When you wear your MBA degree on your lapel, when you wear it around your neck, you have every right to be proud of your achievements. You are amongst a reasonably elite group of young adults who have scaled the peak that you have, and you have every right to be proud. But pride in one's achievements and arrogance are two very different things. And unfortunately, that is a distinction that many people fail to make. This is not necessarily only restricted to MBAs. This is just a general observation. And humility for any number of reasons, right? Because, and I feel that. The words that I said when I started were not merely platitudes. I do really feel humbled in the presence of people like Professor Indrasen. Who am I to be standing here and pontificating when we have people of such learning and eminence here? And I think all the time we come across people like this in our lives. And it's not only on account of academic excellence. My business has to do mostly with semi-literate people, right? We're in the business of financing people who own trucks and buses. Many of them never had a formal school education, right? But that hasn't stopped them from being extremely successful businessmen. They will teach us several things about how to run businesses. And they are living examples of what successful businessmen are. And I often, in conversation with these people, I really do feel, that with all our fancy education, with all the privileges that we've had of English medium schooling and overseas education and everything else, we are not half the businessmen that they are. Their native intelligence is so amazing. The odds that they fight day after day to stay ahead of the game is amazing. I mean, for us, relatively speaking, life has been handed to us on a platter. These are the true champions, right? And I look at them and I think, even for a moment, if you think you are in some way superior, immediately there's something knocking on your head saying, back down. Because when you look at each one of these guys, we are nobody. And life is full of these examples, right? So let's always remember that there are lots of people with lots of different skills, lots of different abilities, which are not always apparent in the form of degrees, right? But it doesn't make them lesser people, and it's good to be aware of that. That's lesson number 2. Lesson number 3 is very topical. Lesson number 3 is that learning never stops. Learning never at all stops. And I find this because these days when I travel, and we have a large number of branch locations across the country, over 500 in fact, and every time I travel to our branches, I spend most of my time just sitting down with my teams. And if I spend an hour with them, I'm hugely enriched in terms of knowledge. This is nothing profound really, because if you look at the diversity of this country, it's it's in many ways actually many different countries. We are politically one country, but culturally we are many different countries. So each place that you go to, the culture is different, the behavior is different, the food is different, the language is different, and the way people react to a given situation varies dramatically from place to place, region to region. And it's only when you spend time with these people you realize this. We, again, the kind of education that we've had, the kind of training that we've had tends to reduce everything to a finite process, right? We're all great guys on process discipline. That's what business schools teach, right? Everything is a template. Everything is a process. In here, out there, boom. Real life doesn't work like that. Because real life is about real people. And real people have very, very different things going on in their heads. So the one thing you don't want to do is to reduce everything to a process. Processes are important, but they come behind people. Processes help people. Processes don't drive people. And I think that's an important learning for anyone, right? But just going back to learning, I don't care how successful you become, I don't care how high you rise in your chosen professions or jobs. I don't care if you become the big boss of the biggest company in the world. Learning does not stop. And most often, the learning comes from quarters and people that you least expect to come from. Small people, little people, suppliers, vendors, the guy who brings you your tea, the guy who operates your lift. All these guys teach you. They don't have prefix of professor or doctor in front of their names, but they teach you. Believe me, they teach you. So lesson number 3 is that learning continues till your grave, really. Never stops. Lesson number 4, I owe much of what I am, after obviously my parents, to my predecessor in Sundaram Finance, Mr. G.K. Raman, late Mr. Raman. He was our managing director for a number of years. I had the privilege of serving him for, the 20-something years, 24 years to be precise, till he passed away. Much of what I learned, much of who I am, much of my accomplishments are really owed to him. Many lessons that I learned from him, from listening to him, from observing him, from just being his shadow for a number of years. Of the many lessons that he taught me, there's one which is particularly colorful in its expression. I hope most of you will follow Tamil. He used to say, நீ எவ்வளோ பெரிய ராஜாவா வேணா இருக்கலாம், ஆனால் பல்லாக்கு தூக்கிறதுக்கு ஆள் வேணும். Which means what? You need 4 people to lift the palanquin. Only then can you be a great emperor, right? Otherwise there'll be the palanquin and there'll be you and you'll just be stationary, right? Which is basically to emphasize the importance of teamwork. We can all be brilliant geniuses, but ultimately, I think if you look around, if you look at all the success stories in the world, you'll find that at the heart of it was great teamwork, as the example of your own school shows. Right? Shankaran is a terrific guy, he's a great motivator, but he too needed a team to get all of you to where you've got. And so it is with any organization, big or small. Again, ambition is all right. Individual brilliance is great. But we will only realize our full potential. We will only contribute to our organizations if we recognize and contribute to a larger team effort. Because ultimately, teams win, right? So, please, as you pursue your dreams, as you pursue your goals, always remember that, there will be times when you're probably tempted to say, why should I help this guy out, right? The simple answer to that is that on another day, you will seek that same favor, right? And that day will come. None of us is God, right? So always put your hand out to the next guy, and believe me, what goes around comes around. But nobody that's become anybody in life has done it, except for the odd, genius who locked himself in a laboratory and did all his experiments by himself. But I suspect even they needed, some sort of a team. But teamwork. Never underestimate today I'm probably more acutely conscious of that than I've ever been in my life, because I sit at the head of a large organization. As I said, we have 500 something branches. We're 2.5 billion US in terms of assets. We're by every yardstick, we're a successful company, we're a respected company. And lots of kind people like Dr. Shankaran pay me compliments for steering the ship successfully. And every time I hear these words, these kind words of praise, I become even more acutely aware of how much of this actually belongs to my team. Because I would be a complete fool if I believed that I was doing all of this myself. Physically, it's impossible. How do you manage 550 branches all by yourself? Doesn't work. So only a fool would delude himself into believing that he was doing it himself. Fortunately, I do not suffer from that delusion, and I recognize how important my team is to everything. And I often say this to my colleagues. I actually, in many ways, have the easiest job of all in my company, because all these guys work really hard to produce all of the results that they produce. I have the happy task of taking all of that, aggregating it, putting it into an annual report and presenting it to the world and saying, here's a great balance sheet of Sundaram Finance. So I'm very privileged to have the team that I have, but as I said, I'm also very, very aware of the fact that without a team, any of us, for that matter, would be nothing. That's lesson number 4. Lesson number 5, the most important lesson that I learnt soon after I joined Sundaram Finance in 1983. As a rookie in Sundaram Finance, I was privileged to sit in on a meeting that was being addressed by our founder and chairman, Mr. Santhanam, who again is someone who's left a huge impression on my life, my career. He said a whole bunch of things, but there's one thing which he said which is sort of stuck in my head to this day. And I repeat this roughly about 100 times each year. Anyone who's willing to listen to me, any crowd, any audience that I talk to, invariably I will say this. And that little thing is that the guy who pays your salary is your customer. It's not your boss, it's not your board, it's not your chairman, it's not your shareholder. The guy who pays your salary is the customer. Worship him, right? We live in a time of CRM, customer ecstasy, delight, this, that, and the other. much of it, unfortunately, I find is just buzzword and talk. The only way to actually realize customer delight or deliver customer delight or customer ecstasy is to begin by believing that he pays your salary. Because if you believe that, it's simple. I mean, we all, sort of, whatever, do chamchagiri to our bosses because he's the guy who writes our appraisal, right? So in a sense, we are programmed to believe that your boss pays your salary, but he doesn't. The guy who actually pays your salary is your customer. Because if he or she stopped being your customer, if every one of your customers stopped being your customer, you and your boss would both be out of a job. Right? It's as stark and as simple as that. So that is a lesson that I learned very early in my life. That's a lesson I've not forgotten at all. And as I said, it's a lesson that I pass on to every new kid who joins our company, every induction program I go to, every senior branch managers meeting that I go to. Sometimes people think it's a broken record, and probably it is, but well worth the repetition. Because to me, that is an overarching truth, right? Which no book on management, which no guru on management has ever articulated or propagated. But this is a lesson that I learnt from, as I said, my founder chairman, Mr. Santanam, and I believe it's probably one of the most powerful truths in business. Big, small, medium, doesn't matter. So that's lesson number 5. And those, in many ways, these are the 5 learnings which have helped me on my path. It's been an exciting journey. It's been a challenging journey. But through all of that, I think I've managed to steer and navigate only because I had the great privilege of being taught by great teachers like the ones I mentioned, and because I have and continue to have the love and affection of a great team. Without those, I think I wouldn't be anywhere near where I am. I'm thankful for these enormous blessings of great teachers, of great colleagues, of great friends who've held my hand, who guided me. And what I would wish for all of you is that you too, as you chart your courses, pick, as I said, my idea was not to sermonize, but just to share with you what some of the things are that have helped me on my way. It could be a different set of 5 things or 3 things or whatever things they are that will help you navigate your paths. But I think it's useful to remember that these are some of the key anchors in one's life, regardless of where you are or who, what you do, what discipline you're in, doesn't matter. I think these truths are sort of agnostic in terms of, disciplines and functions and domains and verticals and horizontals. These are simply simple rules, simple lessons that not always you learn in a formal classroom, but you certainly do learn them in the classroom of life. I guess I've overshot my time. Once again, thank you all very much, especially Dr. Shankaran for giving me this privilege, honor to be here on this momentous occasion of your first ever convocation. I wish all of you the very best as you step out. I'm sure that, there's the old British Airways commercial that I remember, which used to go, "For India, the world is waiting." You know, so I'd say to you, for all of you, India is waiting. So go there and do it. Thank you very much for your attention.